We have a range of questions that we'll go through with the panel today. As you said, we're still waiting for one more panelist to join us, Richard Carey, who's head of commercial from Africa World Airlines. If he joins us, we will of course patch him in. But in the meantime, we have George Fenergi, who's the VP of Business Transformation at SITA, Middle East, Indian Africa, who'll be able to give quite an interesting perspective from a technology point of view. And of course, Mweembe Sikaulu, who's the communications brand manager for Zambia Airports Corporation. So we have a range of questions, and hopefully we'll be able to take some questions from the audience as well to our panelists. But I guess really I'd first want to sort of to kick off Mweembe and sort of and direct one at you, to sort of to get your perspective from someone who is seeing things very much on the ground and at the coalface, if you like. And if you could just maybe give us a quick overview of of what you're doing right now to rebuild confidence during the pandemic and beyond, and just maybe to sort of to outline how things have changed since April, May, and how you see them going forward. So I will pass over to you.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. So yes, obviously a lot has happened and a lot of things have changed. If you look at Zambia in particular, right now we only have one commercial airline that's currently flying, which is Ethiopian Airline, although some of the other airlines are looking to come back soon, at least we hope. So it's sort of split. We have the health aspects of what we're doing in association with Port Authority, and of course from the airport perspective as well. So, for example, we are encouraging passengers to utilize online platforms such as self-checking kiosks, online checking in that the airlines obviously provide on their websites. Traditionally in Zambia, you find that people would prefer to check in at the airport itself, physically check in, and so we normally have queues. So we have been encouraging that in the past in terms of using online platforms, but now we're really hammering the message home, so to speak. We're of course also putting videos on airport screens depicting health measures to be followed and maintained. We're announcing, using the PA system to make announcements, again, for people to follow our measures and guidelines in terms of social distancing and everything else. Of course, we've put signage such as the stickers on the floor that I'm sure everybody's been seeing around the world, whether in airports or supermarkets, the 1 meter distancing. Well, for Zambia, it's 1 meter at least. Of course, also providing medical disposal bins as well for passengers who maybe have blown their nose or want to get rid of their mask that they're wearing. So that's separate from the regular bins that you and I might be using as well. Of course, training our staff how to use PPEs, training cleaners how to disinfect common surfaces. Of course, again, that was done, but now it's just been more of on a regular basis. Of course, you have your check-in counters, your elevators, your lifts, and whatnot as well. And then, of course, from the Port Health Authority, you have a whole different ballgame. You have the health screenings that are coming in, of course, the temperature checks. You have the thermal scannings. You have various forms that they're supposed to fill in. So there's contact tracing. There is a lab test as well. So they also have to fill in forms for that. We test everybody coming into the country for COVID-19. So again, there's the 14-day mandatory self-quarantine that everybody has to go through. So even though you will be allowed to enter the country technically and go to whether it's your hotel or your home, you will be expected to stay there within the 14 days. And if you do test positive for COVID-19, then the Ministry of Health or health officials will come and basically inform you and take it from there. So there are a lot of things happening. Even as you're leaving the country, we do have an exit screening as well, so that if someone, as they've left the country, is found to be positive at their destination, again, we're able to do the contact tracing. So those are just some of the measures that are happening. Of course, there's a lot more, but that's just a snippets of what is happening in Zambia.
Okay, we're going to come back to the issue of testing, to involve both of you a little bit later, because obviously that's a hugely important and also very interesting area. But just a kind of a follow-up question. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is about changing behavior. I mean, you mentioned that that people are used to the comfort factor, if you like, of sort of checking in at the airport, and you're asking them to change a lot of the behaviors that they're used to. How successful are you finding, passenger adherence to some of the measures that you've implemented?
It's been interesting. So I think it's been a mixed bag. So you do find that, especially with arriving passengers, there's been no issues as well. But of course, passengers leaving the country are still expecting their loved ones, for example, to enter the terminal and do the usual goodbyes and associations and whatnot. However, going forward, you will find that we've had to restrict entrance into the terminal. So, for example, you would have to say goodbye to your family and friends from outside, because again, we want to keep not only the traveling public but also staff as well safe. So we have to now have a bit more of a controlled environment than we would have had before. So it's a lot more restricted than in the past.
I mean, a lot of what you've mentioned does involve technological solutions. I guess this is a good, point to bring in George. And George, I just wonder if you could give us an overview of the main focus areas for industry stakeholders from your point of view that can rebuild traveler confidence, and in particular, obviously, because it's very much your area of expertise, what role technology is going to play going forward. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, hi Derek, how are you? Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So yes, basically, let me say that traveler confidence is really one of the most important elements these days, if not the most important. I have been attending sessions today on the Africa Tomorrow, and I see everybody's talking about confidence. It's a big thing for the industry to ensure there is passenger confidence. When we say passenger confidence, from our interaction with various industry stakeholders globally, we are seeing really four areas. So we can say, and Mweembe tackled indirectly the four of them: social distancing. We can talk about hygiene and sanitization. We can talk about passenger health checks, and we can talk about communication, passenger communication. So these four areas are the focus, and it can go really from low tech to high tech. So social distancing, it can go from putting stickers on the ground to reaching to an artificial intelligence software that can detect a distance between people, and it can know even if people are wearing masks. So these are the four market drivers, social distancing, hygiene and sanitization, passenger communication, and passenger health checks. Technology is here to support, and technology is here to complement what airports and airlines are doing. If I want to give few examples, if I will give maybe one example per category, if I say distancing, so there is now a very famous extending the airport boundaries and doing check-in and backdrop at the home. So what used to be a limousine service, now we are finding that it's really more and more airport and airlines are asking technology to enable passengers to check in and to drop their bag at their home or at their hotel. This will minimize the number of passengers in the terminal, in the check-in area. And obviously, this is tackling directly the social distancing with technology. So this is one example, for example. We can talk about multiple examples, but this is one example. If I want to talk about hygiene and sanitization, we are finding that mobility is big. What is the safest thing you can touch other than your mobile? So if you check in using your mobile, if you control the kiosk even using your mobile, because Mweembe mentioned that self-service is key, but you don't want people to touch the kiosks. So now from your mobile, you can control the kiosk. You can control the backdrop from your mobile. You can board using your mobile. So mobility is really big, which used to be a very big in passenger facilitation. Now mobility is a key element in supporting the low touch in COVID-19 and to support airports in their efforts for hygiene and sanitization. So this is another example under hygiene and sanitization. If I want to talk about passenger health checks, obviously, elevated body temperature at the entrance of each terminal, but also what about governments collecting health data from the passenger even before his travel? When he's booking his ticket, governments can start collecting passenger health data, and then they can make a board and no board decision based on a sophisticated risk engine if the passenger is allowed to come to the country or not. Obviously, finally, on passenger communication, we need to keep the passengers up to date. We need to keep, so you can use the flight information display system to send some key messages. And also now there is the mobile feeds, again, coming to mobility. You don't want people getting crowded next to feeds, screen banks. So you are ensuring that they have FIDs on their mobile. So these are very simple examples, technological examples, how every technology can support a certain effort that the airport is doing. So this is how we are finding that technology is complementing the effort for the passenger confidence, really.
I want to kind of then to move on to two, I mean, for both of you, to two related areas. First of all, the idea of testing before travel or testing on arrival. And secondly, the idea of digital immunity passports, which kind of touches on some of the things that you've talked about. Now, I'm going to lay my cards on the table right away. Is that I edit an industry magazine, industry newsletter, and I am very much pro-testing. You know, I mean, the editorial line that I take all the time is that I believe that testing is the one thing that will unlock a recovery in the air travel industry. Because as you well know, 40% of people who have the virus are asymptomatic. So a lot of the passenger checks, and there have been cases in the you'll be aware of in the Far East, where on one or two occasions, for example, passengers from Kuala Lumpur and from Manila who went into Hong Kong, which does have testing on arrival, took over-the-counter medication to sort of to mask their symptoms. So I'm curious, first of all, Mweembe, to sort of hear in detail of the testing solution that you have on arrival, how that works, and then maybe if I could sort of to talk to both of you about how you see testing evolving and how you see the sort of the importance of some kind of digital immunity passports that that proves that that you've been tested, and of course from next year proves that you have some kind of vaccination. So Mweembe, I'll move on to.
Okay, so also for full disclosure, I just want to mention that we do have health professionals from the Ministry of Health who are actually doing all of these testing, and it's not just us as professionals. You actually have trained medical staff doing that. So basically, as a passenger is arriving, they do have to fill out certain forms in terms of contact tracing. Well, it's called a health declaration form. And of course, they do have to go through the scanning as well, thermal scanning. So once they get through the initial arrival processes, again, there's another health section that they have to go through. So they have to now be tested and taken into a little booth where the testing is done. And again, fill in forms. So basically from there, they are allowed to collect their luggage and then move on into, get into their cars and get to their hotels or to their houses. So unfortunately right now, the testing takes about, I think for the results, it takes about 2 to 3 days for somebody to find out whether or not they're positive. So for example,
when we start to interrupt you, is this a kind of a nasal swab test that they get, or sort of what kind of test is it?
Yes.
Do you know? It is. Okay, sorry, go on.
Yes. Yes. So basically, they'll get the results within 2 to 3 days. So at the moment, like I think you mentioned, for example, in Asia, in Hong Kong, for example, their results are out within 8 hours. So you're actually staying in the airports as you're waiting for the results. But because we haven't yet had those rapid testing kits yet, so it's more practical to let somebody go and do the 14-day quarantine. So that's basically what's currently happening. So I guess as the testings become more accurate and they're able to do more rapid testing, then I think we'll be looking more towards the Asia way of doing things. Of course, I don't want to speak too much on behalf of the Ministry of Health because obviously they have their own ways of doing things. So in regards to, I think you asked me another question before the immunity passports.
Because obviously, sort of, I mean, and to look at testing before travel, because obviously there is a facility right now that someone, here in London or in any major city can go to a private clinic. Can obviously at the moment it is not cheap to be tested, but it is possible. And then for some kind of verification process. And I just want to sort of hear your viewpoint on how important that is going to be going forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's going to be something that should be supported, in my opinion. I think it would be great because, again, when you're looking at testing prior to travel, I mean, if you're a passenger on a flight, then you know that each and every person that is on that flight tested negative. And again, if you do test positive before you travel, assuming you're in your home country, then you can have you have a health system that you're familiar with. You have your support system, and you're able to quarantine, for example, in your own home, as opposed to being in a foreign country and having to now spend a lot of money on, for example, a hotel, not being familiar with the health system there, and also maybe looking for a repatriation flight if you're not going to be able to go on a commercial flight. So I do feel that it's actually less risky if a lot of people, if all passengers are traveling are tested prior to getting on the flight. And of course, even for the country that you're going to be arriving into, again, it's a lot more, they're going to be a lot more welcoming, knowing that everybody who's coming into their country will be COVID-free and are not bringing the virus into their space, so to speak. So you find that they'll be a lot more welcoming, and even from a tourism aspect, for example, I think everybody would be a lot more freer. So I just think that it actually would help help the industry, have people gain more confidence in the industry rather, and I think it would be a good thing for aviation and for airlines as well, for airports, just basically the industry all around.
Absolutely, and I mean, I think one of the things that I'm seeing is the most encouraging things is how advancements in testing are becoming, sort of a more and more rapid and sort of becoming more accurate, cheaper, and faster. I mean, you'll probably be aware that that Frankfurt Airport, for example, has an on-site testing facility where, I mean, it is still, it's still reasonably expensive, and it still takes, a reasonably long amount of time. I mean, so a rapid test costs, I believe, 159 euros and takes 3 hours, or 139 euros. And a standard test costs 59 euros, but it takes 68 hours. So it's not really practical to sort of to hang around an airport for 68 hours and wait for your test results. But they're able to do it at scale. So they're able to process 5,000 in a day, and they have a testing lab on site, which is obviously one of the biggest things that it doesn't have to be sent off somewhere else and then take a day or two to come back. And just yesterday, there was an announcement from Moscow that there's work happening from the Russian Development Investment Fund to introduce a pilot program for tests where the tests will be back within 1 hour. And they've talked about, their press release talks about a suitcase type kit. So again, something very, very portable that can be done and can be done on departure. And I believe that's being trialed in the United Arab Emirates and Japan as well. So, so it is positive to see, a lot of advances in testing that will become much more accessible in the type of solutions that you're talking about. But George, I just want to bring you in as well to get your overview on the whole testing environment, and then in particular, from a technology point of view, what role digital immunity passports can play, whether you think they're a good thing, and how in practice they should work.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is before being industry professionals, we are passengers ourselves. So for me personally, if I want to travel and I can know that people on the plane are all tested negatively, at least within the last 48 to 72 hours, 100% I will be more comfortable. So I'm exactly like you and Mweembe, I'm pro testing before the flight. So the test is taking 24 to 48 hours, and then the validity of the test, depending on the country, is they said it should remain between 72 to 96 hours. But of course, you can catch COVID-19 within these days, but at least you minimize the fact that people are testing positive and you have on the plane. So personally, I believe I'm pro testing, and testing should be done before going on a plane. So this is personally, it's a personal preference. This is departure. Regarding arrival, there are lots of technological measures that can help. This early travel authorization, ETA. So now it's in multiple countries, they have introduced ETA. So you have to apply for an ETA so you can get approved to travel. Recently, just 1 month ago, we have introduced health ETA. So it's a health electronic travel authorization. So you have to, if I'm traveling to London to UK, for example, from Dubai. So if London is having this health ETA, I have to apply. I have to answer a few questions. I have to upload few documents, and then they have to approve me before I travel. So this kind of health ETA is they can deny me to go to London before I arrive there and I infect people, and there is behind some risk engine. So where did I travel in the last few weeks? Where was I? Where was I exposed? So there is a risk engine that is working on the health ETA that will even, as if you are extending the borders. Traditionally, this kind of technology is implemented by SITA for terrorism. For terrorism, for burglars, you expand the borders of your airport, of your country. So you are not allowed to come to my country and then I catch you here. No, I don't allow you to come even I don't allow you to board the plane in the departure. So now it's having a health pandemic angle, and it's coming to becoming a health ETA. So governments now will deny you to come to their countries based on your test results, on your health results, on some questions. So this is really important to extend the borders. So this is from an arrival perspective, and all this is leading to the immunity digital passport. Obviously, it's a good idea, and technically speaking, it is somewhat easy. It's not really very complicated using blockchain in the background. The complexity is really the implementation of it. The complexity is the multitude of stakeholders, you know, country A, country B, airline, health authorities, you know, multiple immunity passports. So you need all the stakeholders across your journey from point A to point B, including the health authorities of both countries, to be using the same immunity passport. And so this is a little bit the challenge about implementation, about what if I'm using immunity passport A, and it's certified to run on airline 1, and then it's approved by health authority B, then this health authority C doesn't allow this immunity passport. It's working with another health passport, and my data is on another blockchain. So the challenge is in implementation, but obviously, you know, if industry bodies and if, you know, from a World Tourism Organization, they gather around few immunity passports, all governments, they have to work with it. Obviously, it's a good idea. This is from my side. And then instead of now uploading documents to SITA Health ETA, I can upload my digital passport to the SITA Health ETA, and then the system will ensure that this is a genuine. So it's all complementing each other. But so eventually, it's obviously a good idea. Technically, not very challenging. The challenge is, I find it in the implementation.
And just sort of moving forward a bit from that and looking forward to next year. I mean, as you'll be aware, I mean, there are about 160 vaccine trials for COVID-19 in development right now. And when I look ahead to 2021, I mean, I personally think that, you know, that maybe a year from now that we will be in what you might call, because obviously yesterday there were the test results from the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca study, which has some positive results. I know that CanSino in China, they've actually started giving the vaccine to the Chinese military. There's Moderna in the USA, which is fairly well advanced. So there are about 4 or 5 projects which are at a quite advanced stage of development, and of course, production is happening before final approval happens. So the idea that these vaccines will be around at some point in 2021. But of course, what that means is that you may well have several vaccine candidates around. Depending on the country, and you will have some people who will be vaccinated and some people who won't. And I'm just interested to sort of to hear both of your point of view about how the industry is going to deal with with what you might call a part vaccinated world, and what the entry requirements will be, what role the digital immunity passports that you mentioned will play, and whether destinations will require some kind of proof in the same way that that yellow fever certificates, for example, have been have been in place for several destinations. So I will start with you, Mweembe, to get your.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be as simple as it sounds. I think when you're looking at it, of course, in terms of gaining confidence in the industry and people to travel into various countries, I think yes, it would help definitely. But of course, it also depends on, for example, the acceptance by the members of the public to get vaccinated. Like you mentioned, you have some people that are going to be vaccinated, some people that will not. So like yellow fever, will you be allowed into a certain country if you haven't been vaccinated? So for example, if you have Asian countries, maybe it might be more easier to administer as opposed to, let's say, African countries. Maybe there might be a need to have an awareness campaign to dispel based on history, for example. In certain Western countries, maybe you might have citizens feeling that being vaccinated is an infringement on civil rights, for example. So, you know, if, for example, right now we're having issues of people wearing masks in certain countries, then what more a vaccine? So it would be interesting. I think that it would help, but at the same time, it might not be as easy to implement as we might think. You know, sometimes some people will think, oh, as long as it's a vaccine, then everybody will take it and everybody will, you know, be able to have access to certain countries. So I do feel in the long run it will help. In the long run, I feel that countries will be most likely demanding it. But I think the implementation, depending on the region of the world, may not be as simple.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned that sort of the United States, there is obviously a strong, you know, anti-vaxxer movement, you know, and I have read surveys about a certain percentage of the population will refuse a vaccine point blank, because, as you say, because they see it an infringement of their, you know, of their liberties, if you like, or because they question the, you know, health risks of being vaccinated. The other thing is obviously this idea of complexity, is that if you have 160 trials which are ongoing right now, you know, 5 which are quite advanced stages, is they all work in different ways and they all have different, you know, and they all are effective differently. You know, some may require to have a booster, some may take longer than others, and that's obviously quite a complex environment which we'll be working in. So, George, I just want to bring you in and get your perspective on, you know, and as we say, a sort of a part vaccinated world in 2020.
Yeah, indeed. You know, it's not like sometimes you hear people talking as if, you know, when the vaccine is there, it's like a flip of a switch, you know, like between one day and another, the entire world will be vaccinated and then COVID is gone. So unfortunately, it won't be that way. Even distributing the vaccine, ensuring it's tested, ensuring that multiple countries will get a fair quantities, the anti-vaccine movements, there are so many things that are, you know, it will be a very long phased approach. So that's why we are saying that, you know, this is the new normal. So the new normal is coming and it's not going away. So, and to a little bit put things into perspective from that, before COVID-19, we were talking about mobility so controlling everything with your mobile, regardless of COVID-19, part of passenger experience. So now this mobility trend is helping COVID-19 regardless of the pandemic or not. Another example, biometric. Your face is your boarding pass. You will register your face and then you will not touch anything. This was good for facilitation. It was good for security, regardless of COVID-19. So there are a big amount of technologies that got accelerated rather than the new technologies. So that's why I'm thinking the new normal, instead of reaching there in 2025, 2026, we are reaching there in 2021 now. So this accelerated the future rather than having a completely new. So the new normal was going to be the normal, but it came faster. So that's why it's not like a flip of a switch. Technology is here to support. These technologies were going to be there anyway, and it's just a people mindset to be living in the new normal, to be living with the COVID-19. You know, maybe in a year's time, hopefully not, you will get COVID-20. God knows. So this pandemic now, it's really part of our day-to-day. It's not only about smugglers, and it's not only about terrorism when it comes to aviation. It's also health is now an equally important pillar now that we have to live with for the remaining days. This is how I see it.
Josh, I just want to go back because we've got a question for you in particular about digital immunity passport. We've got a question here about how long will it take to get an immunity passport, and what happens to someone who has to make an impromptu trip. So let's say I have to make a trip, you know, sort of I'm told I've got to make a trip on Thursday, you know, to travel to Dubai. You know, what would be the process of me getting one of these, and how quickly would it happen?
So basically, you know, if you follow the process, first you have to download one of the immunity passports. You have to get the ID. So depending if your country is supporting digital immunity passports or not, you can do it entirely by yourself, or you have to go to some national government entity to really ensure that this is you and ensure that this is now you have a valid ID. So depending on the types of country, it's fairly quickly. But then you have to go to a health agency that is really also running on the same immunity passport. You will do the test, and then hopefully you will be negative, and they upload the results on your ID, and now you are set. So it's not really, it's not honestly really difficult, as long as it's just an app you download, you get your ID, you go do your test. Your test results are going to be uploaded to your ID. You cannot tamper them because they are on the blockchain. And now you go to an airline, you go to an airport, as long as they use the same let's say platform, then they can just scan your barcode and then ensure that you are really tested. So it's fairly simple. It's fairly simple. It's not really very sophisticated, high tech. It will take, depending on the country, if you can do it by yourself at home, or you have to go to a government entity that will help you create your ID to minimize the forgeries. And thereon, it's a matter of just using your passport. Like I really like you are using e-wallet today. You pay with your mobile, you register, you get your credit card attached to your e-wallet, you can put cash, and then you can go and scan a barcode. It's as simple as this. But the amount of stakeholders involved, this is the challenging part. So I hope this is a satisfactory answer to paint the picture.
Great, thank you very much. Mweembe, I've got a question in particular for you, and it's about, not so much traveler confidence, but confidence, because certainly I am aware that in a lot of the tourism industry, that sentiment is moving two ways. On one hand, there is awareness that tourism needs to restart because quite frankly, a lot of people's jobs depend on it, and it's important to the economy. But on the other hand, there's also fear that air travel and the tourism based, and I'd just be interested to hear what you're seeing on the ground and what the sentiment is between those two.
Really, I think it's a mixed bag. I think right now in Zambia in particular would be happy to welcome back tourism because that industry is suffering. And from what we're seeing with the airline coming in, which is, I've mentioned, Ethiopian Airways, we have had quite a few tourists still coming in. I've been seeing even the domestic flights going into Livingston, which is our tourist capital, and going into another area called Mfuwe, which is where we have a lot of safaris, in fact, the best safaris in the world. So you find a lot of tourists still going there. And then, of course, from our end, of course, you have members of the public who are still a little bit, worried to say, are these coming in the disease and whatnot. But even from the Zambia Tourism Association, I think they had a meeting last week actually with stakeholders just to find out how they could adjust the way that things are done. So for example, you have certain activities like whitewater rafting, boat cruises and whatnot, where you have a lot of people congregating in one area, which is easy for the virus to spread if one does have it. So again, looking at, do you have only, let's say, one other person in a helicopter ride, or are you still able to have, let's say, 2, 3, 4 people? If you have a lot of conferences, which we do have in Livingston, for example, how many people, the seating, and because again, with conferences, for example, you want, the biggest, the halls, you want to fit as many people in there and whatnot, because again, that's also how hotels make money, and also the organizations as well, in terms of attendance, attendance and everything, payments and whatnot. So you do have all those aspects that you're looking at. One of the discussions that was even there was something as simple as a cocktail. Is it possible to still hold cocktails? If you do hold a cocktail, how are you going to do it? So again, there were all these details that they really had to consider. Walking with, for example, walking safari. Again, you have to huddle in close. If you're going to do walking with the lions, or you're walking and an elephant is coming nearby, how do you handle that? Because there's also the safety aspect in that regard. So it's quite interesting to see what the various stakeholders were actually stating. Of course, everybody is willing to welcome back tourists and are willing to actually put in new legislations, new norms, should I say, in order to make it happen. So it's not that anybody's being resistant to change or anything like that. Of course, from the population perspective, they're also looking, not population, sorry, the citizen perspective, they're also looking at domestic tourism and seeing how best that can be increased as well, because Zambians, for example, do like traveling outside of the country more than within the country, as opposed to, for example, let's say Americans or even South Africans who do a lot of domestic travel. Zambians are the opposite. So again, trying to encourage Zambians to actually travel within the country as well to help support those industries.
I guess that brings on to a point of, when you talk about the tourism and all in general, there's a kind of a fine line between reassuring people and frightening them. And on one hand, you want to ensure that that the local population and obviously people who work in the tourism industry are safe, and also that the tourists are safe from each other. But on the other hand, you don't want to have the measures to be so off-putting that that people don't think that it's going to be an enjoyable experience anymore. And I'd be interested to hear from both of you, and Mweembe, you first, because obviously you've just mentioned a few of the things that are happening on the ground. Where is that fine line between reassurance and not frighten people, sort of altogether, that they think that it's not going to be enjoyable to travel in?
Yeah, I think, well, it's important to ensure that, for example, passengers and if you're talking about the airport, for example, passengers and staff are both feeling protected. So again, it's important to understand how the virus is actually transmitted. So the health authorities have been, I know everything changes every day. You're hearing asymptomatic people can't pass the virus, then you're hearing that they can. So, information is changing every day. But it's still important to listen to, for example, the aviation bodies regarding health regulations and guidelines, and the same with the health professionals. So, for example, at the airport, staff will be wearing PPEs. They also need to feel protected. I know some countries have their staff in full hazmat suits. If that's what they feel that it's comfortable for them, then that is fine. But at the same time, you shouldn't be able to frighten passengers, as long as they also feel that the airport is doing enough and there's adequate protection for them and also members of staff as well. So as mentioned, it's important to understand how the virus is transmitted. And so if health professionals, for example, are telling everybody to wear masks, then it's important to follow the health guidelines. Here in Zambia, we have stated that if you're going to enter the airport, everybody has to be wearing a mask. Everybody has to do the social distancing. You will have our members of staff in PPEs, not so much the hazmat suits, but of course, planes will be disinfected. They'll be wearing the right gear for that as well. But even just interacting with our passengers, just making sure that adequate, appropriate, and efficient PPEs are in place for the protection of the passengers and of themselves.
Aware that we're running out of time, so George, I'll just let you just handle that one as well, where you see the sort of the fine line between reassurance and not frightening people off, just as a sort of as a final point.
One thing that comes to mind based on this question, the passenger trip, it goes from airport A, airline, and then airport B. So, and then suddenly, airport A did a fantastic job, airline did a fantastic job, and then airport B did something messy, then his entire trip will be messed up in his view. So that's why there are multiple stakeholders in this journey. And for me, frightening, I think more, if you feel that the airport doesn't know what he's doing or the airline are running in circles, if you go and you find queues, if you go and you see that people are not wearing masks and nobody's saying anything, if you see that the airport didn't reduce its capacity and still is accommodating multiple airlines at the same time and the security is crowded, this is where I'm really getting worried. I feel that they are panicking, they are not organized. This is where it's not really from hazmat suit or not, it's more from behavior, it's more from they need to make the passenger feel comfortable and that there is no panic. This is really in my mind. It has to be the entire chain, if I can say. It's not just one airline or one airport. It has to be well coordinated across. This is what I can say about that.
Okay, amazing. I know we're out of time, and I can see that Uri is here as well. So I will just hand back to Uri to sort of to round up. Uri? Oh, he's gone. Well, I will say in his absence, say thank you for the both of you. I know that George, you've got another sort of another panel to go to. Obviously, if anyone has any follow-up questions, by all means, they should they should connect with you afterwards, either here or on LinkedIn. I hope to see everyone at some of the panels later on.
Thank you. See you,
Thank you so
Mweembe.
much.
Take care.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you so
Thank you
much.
for the
Yeah.
listeners. Thank you.